Good morning. My name is Dr. Letitia Ingracia Cardoso Brown, and I am here with Nuts and Bolts Sports, getting ready to interview gymnast Olivia Lubarsky. Welcome. Good morning, and welcome, Olivia Lubarsky with Nuts and Bolts Sports. So, I've done a lot of research because gymnastics is my all-time favorite sport. So I'm looking forward to talking with you, and I have a couple of questions to kind of start off. So tell me a bit about yourself, like your childhood, what got you into gymnastics in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Los Angeles, California. I'm one of four girls, the oldest. So I've got three sisters. We're all 1 year apart. And when you've got four girls running around the house, gymnastics seems like a pretty smart outlet. I think one of my sisters went to a preschool field trip to a gym and came home absolutely loving it. And so my mom thought it'd be a good idea to put all four of us in it. And I really just stuck with it for a few many years.
Yeah. Do any of your sisters still do gymnastics?
No, so we actually all did it for years, and they kind of retired at various points in high school. So I'm the only one still in it, but it's been quite the journey.
I'm sure. So what led you to pursue gymnastics at the collegiate level?
I think it was always a dream. I started gymnastics when I was 8, which is relatively late for a gymnast.
Yeah.
So was never really on that international elite Olympic level track. But the dream for me was acquiring a spot on a Division I gymnastics team. So really very happy to be at Towson.
Yeah. How does it feel being across the country?
It's definitely different. That was actually something that I looked for, though, during the whole college recruiting process. There's only about 58 Division I gymnastics programs throughout the country. So I kind of had my sights set on a Division I program on the East Coast. I thought that, college was the perfect opportunity to throw myself across the country for 4 years and just kind of challenge myself. And it definitely was a challenge, but I really do love it out here.
That's awesome. So college athletics can take its toll. I mean, having to balance training, competing, and classes. What has that experience been like for you?
It's definitely a lot. During high school, I was still training a lot, so it wasn't even like the hours that were a big shock. In high school, I went to school from about 7:30 to 12:30, got in the car, drove an hour to practice, and practice was normally from 2 o'clock to 8. So my day, I was kind of used to having my day packed, but I think college, there's a little bit of a shock just in the whole scheduling. When I came to college, I had practice in the morning, so I was training from 7 to 11, which meant you were in the training room at around 6:15, heating those ankles, trying to get your body ready for practice, and then right back out after practice for ice and any rehab you had, then straight to class. So kind of, picking two between showering or grabbing food or anything, going straight to class. And then I was normally done with class around 5 o'clock and, getting that homework done, getting those studies in, and then kind of just gearing up for the next day. But it was definitely a lot. And again, just, you like don't think of some of those things when you're like on your own across the country and you're like, oh my gosh, like toothpaste isn't in the upstairs hall closet. So it's definitely a transition, but it was nice having, that immediate family kind of community with my team, which was nice.
That's awesome. What's your major?
So I'm a little bit all over the place. I have a business administration major, and I'm taking a legal studies concentration. And then I also have a minor in psychology.
Wow. What has your favorite class been so far?
Gosh, that's actually a really good question. I've really enjoyed some of my legal studies classes, but I think overall, psychology has been something that's pretty close to my heart, obviously with all the work that I've done. And I really like those like ethics classes that I've taken.
Nice. As a sociology professor, asking questions about class is my favorite thing to
Yes. No,
do.
my team kind of like calls me a nerd, but I just love learning.
That's the best. And so, thinking about your major in psychology, when it comes to sports like gymnastics, we hear a lot about how it can take a toll on your bodies. We hear about injuries, we hear about eating disorders, but we hear less about the toll that it can take on your mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. I think, with any sport, it's constantly referred to as, the game is 90% mental and 10% physical. And like I said earlier, every single day I was in the training room before and after practice, taking care of my body to be able to perform and excel in practice and competition. But that focus wasn't, carried to the same extent with our mental health. There wasn't those just regular check-ins that are just like, kind of just no big deal. I think that, every day we take care of our bodies. And I think that every day, everyone really, but specifically with athletics, we need to be checking in on our mental health as well.
Definitely. And so, talk to me about your mental health work. You're a council member for Collegiate Mental Health Initiative Council, president of Student Advisory Committee. You've done a lot, and I'd just like to hear more in your own words.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, college has been quite the journey for me, lots of ups and downs. I think I've grown a lot, which has been obviously a challenge, but I'm really proud of the growth that I've gone through. So during that transition, coming all the way across the country, I was a very independent kid. With gymnastics, recruiting's done pretty early. So when I committed to Towson at the start of my junior year of high school, that was almost kind of on the late end.
Wow.
But the moment, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But the moment I expressed my verbal commitment to Towson's team, I had a countdown on my phone, to the days until I would get to move into the dorm. Towson was going to be the best 4 years of my life. And definitely had some great times, but it was a challenge. And I think that just the whole transition can be a lot. And so I fell into a depression. And when I finally acknowledged that I wasn't okay, I called my mom and I said, I think I'm depressed, but that sounds really dramatic. And we kind of talked it through, and she's like, you know what, Liv, sounds like you are struggling. We'll figure this out. And so it was pretty tough. I went to the Towson's Counseling Center on campus, and, they're welcoming to student athletes just as they are to any other student. But for me, I personally had a pretty frustrating experience. Upon arrival, they tell you that you have 1 or 2 appointments, and then if they feel like your needs are beyond what they can provide, they'll refer you off campus. And I walked in there and I was like, I'm not that bad. I'm fine. And then at the start of my second meeting, it was like, here you go. Here's a list of referrals. And I was kind of taken aback. And then it was just this panic because, like I said, I was in practice from 7 to 11, class until about 5 o'clock. So even finding a place that was open past, normal business hours was pretty tough. Then finding someone that fit my insurance and that, I didn't have a car on campus. I was across the country. So there were all these factors, but I had to see someone to stay on the team. And so it was really frustrating. And the first therapist that I connected with, suggested that I quit. And she's like, well, it's not making you happy. And I was like, oh, 1,000% you're right. But at the time, gymnastics was my everything. And I think one of the hardest lessons in life that I've learned is that there's more to life than gymnastics. There's more to life than athletics. But when you're coming from training 6 hours a day, and it pretty much every action that I took, with my sleep, with my nutrition, was all related to practice the next day or an upcoming competition. So hearing that, I kind of shut down. Tried a little bit with antidepressants. For me personally, just didn't work for me. I didn't really feel like myself enough, and I got really nauseous. But so it was definitely a challenge, and it pushed me to grow. I think that looking back, my battles with depression stemmed from this striving for perfection that with such a stubborn focus on failure that it became not functional. So I would go to practice and I would stand up on that beam for like 30 minutes and just not go for a skill. And while fear is a very big factor in gymnastics, it wasn't because I was scared of the skill, but it was because I was scared I was going to fall. And I related that. I thought in my head that one practice in September, if I fell in that one skill, that meant in February during competition season, there'd be no chance I was competing. So it became this like pretty paralyzing cycle. Learning to overcome that, going into my sophomore year, I kind of learned to use athletics and gymnastics as my outlet. It was just my escape from all my emotions and everything else. I think that one of the greatest things about gymnastics specifically is that when you're in the gym and you're doing those routines and you're doing those skills, you have to be focused. Like if you go for a run, you can kind of think about whatever's going on in your day. But when I'm doing gymnastics, I have these specific keywords. And if those aren't in my head, I'm going to fall, I could get hurt. So it's just a sport that requires a lot of focus, which for me was really great because I didn't have time to focus on, the stressors and maybe the negatives that were in my head that day. So going into my sophomore year in the fall, I joined a club on campus called Active Minds. And they're just a student group geared towards fighting the stigma around mental health. And I personally felt that it was a pretty passive group, at least the chapter that was on our campus that year. And so I'm a pretty passionate person, and if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all out. And so I was kind of frustrated, but again, I was still trying to find, my own ground and my own stability. So stayed in the club for a little bit, and in the back of my head, I was just like, you know what? There's just something about athletics, and, especially when failure is so prevalent, but it's so not ever addressed, like, we just got to do something. So that thought in the back of my head was just kind of like brewing for a little bit. And then it was like the last practice before I was supposed to compete for the very first time in college, tumbling in practice, and I fully ruptured my Achilles.
Oh, man.
And yeah, that was pretty devastating to say the least. That's an injury that kind of knocks you on your butt for at least 10 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And so like looking back, I was like, you know what, I picked such a good coping mechanism with exercise, for my mental health. And then I tore my Achilles, and I knew that gymnastics would end, but I never thought I wouldn't be able to work out. And for that, like first month, like they do not let you do anything. Because, even like upper body, like trying to lift, like it would increase swelling in my Achilles and reduce healing. And I was just like sitting there at practice for 4 hours a day, not really allowed to do anything. And I was like, oh my God, all these emotions, I don't even know what to do with myself. So that was pretty much like an immediate switch in my head. And I was like, we're doing something. I had no idea what I was going to do and no idea what the idea, really was. But I had surgery a few days after I got hurt. My mom flew out, which was awesome. And she like went to go get food like for us and came back, and like I was on the phone with like our admin, and my mom was like, Olivia, like, what are you doing? Like, you're definitely high on whatever they had given me for surgery. Yeah. And I was like, no, it's fine. Like, I was like, we got to do something. And so that kind of was the start of this planning for what I created, which is Own Your Roar.
Yes.
And that has just been really, really exciting. Again, like that process was pretty wild. When I was struggling my freshman year, I really didn't talk to anybody on campus outside of my team. I shut down a lot. So when I pitched the idea to athletics administration, the first thing I was invited to do was go speak at SAC. And SAC is the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. I think almost every institution has one. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. Like, I was like, Mom, I can't do that. I don't know anybody on campus. I don't know anyone in athletics. Like, I know my teammates, that's it. And I walked into that meeting and I had a whole speech. Like, I was so prepared. I was like totally red in the face, and kind of gave my pitch. And there were probably one or two representatives from every sports team on our campus. Mm-hmm. And everyone was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. Or, I've kind of gone through it myself, or I've seen it, or my friends struggled. But yeah, we should definitely do something like this. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's not just me. And so that kind of throughout building and the development, even now, sometimes when I feel like, again, I'm kind of a perfectionist. So when like attendance at our meetings isn't super high or whatever, and I get frustrated with, myself, or I doubt what we're doing, it's kind of validating and helpful to see it being pushed by a larger community. And so end of my sophomore year, Own Your Roar launched. My junior year, we had a few like speakers and everything, which was really, really cool. I'm not sure if you've heard of the group We're All a Little Crazy.
No.
So basically it's a group. They have a huge presence on social media and everything, but there's this guy, Eric, who is phenomenal. He's like a former sports executive, and he teamed up with a bunch of like celebrity influencers, and he launched a college campus tour. So I had applied on behalf of Towson, and they selected 15 schools, and I was like beyond thrilled that we got it, because it was next to these like big name schools like Michigan and University of Southern California. I was like, oh my gosh, Towson made it. So they came to campus, and about a week before the event, I had asked our athletic director that it be mandated for all of athletics because I had applied for it. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, sounds great. So we had this conference call, and I think I was just like included as like a courtesy, because they were talking about just like the arena and the venue and whatever, and how the night was going to go. And at the end of the conversation, the CEO, Eric, said, oh, by the way, we also like to invite, maybe a member of your counseling center staff or some faculty to join us on the panel. One of our athletics administrators said, oh, I bet Liv would do it. And I was like maybe kind of paying attention, but like also kind of not, because I didn't even know what I was doing on this call. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then afterwards, I like didn't hear anything from him. So I'm like, okay, like probably not in it. They never really had a student.
Yeah.
So then 2 days before the event, I reached out to the guy. I'm like, hey, am I like speaking? Like, am I in this? And he was like, yep, like you're all in. I was like, okay, like, can I ask you like any questions I'm going to be asked just so I can prepare? He was like, nothing you haven't answered before. And I was like, yeah, that totally was not my question. But what I said was, all right, sounds great, thanks. So not only, was I just a few months ago, like had to share my story for, just a few representatives from each sport, but then I shared it to our entire athletics department. So coaches, staff, trainers, and every athlete, which for me was like pretty much the biggest like community I had ever seen. And so that was probably one of the most terrifying and one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had. I was, very nervous beforehand and wasn't sure kind of how much I was going to share, what I was going to share. And I was talking to my parents, and they just said, you know what, you've come so far, you've grown so much. The first step to destigmatizing mental health is to normalize it. And so like, we think we can do it. And I was like, all right, like, I guess. And just the energy at the end of the night in that arena was just incredible. I had athletes coming up to me like left and right, some kind of just appreciating my story, some relating to my story. And I had one athlete approach me and kind of broke down. And they said, I don't think I'm okay. Where can I go? And that really broke me, because just like me, this athlete had tried the counseling center. This athlete had tried medication, and just nothing was working. And there just seemed to be this disconnect with athletics that this athlete couldn't seem to shake. And so what initially started as an awareness campaign grew into a program. And so over that year, I was brainstorming, because Towson, like a lot of other NCAA institutions, doesn't have incredible financial resources to just hire an entire clinical staff. And my whole philosophy is a very big word, but I like to pretend that I have one. And my whole idea is that, so often I think people think that there is just like one solution to reducing the prevalence of mental illness, and that being to increase clinical staff. But I think that there's so much more that can be done without that, without hiring staff if the, financial means are not there. I think that education is extremely important. Half the time someone says that they're struggling with depression, no one knows what to do and no one knows what to say. So I think that mandating mental health education is extremely important. But like I said, the life of a student athlete and the schedule is just incredibly demanding. So if you're just adding these seminars and kind of what I refer to as that textbook information, no one's going to show up. Like, everyone is just already exhausted by every obligation that they already have to go to. And I mean, how many times do we go to a meeting and the first thing we're doing is like, oh, like, how long do we have to be here?
Yeah.
So I think that coupling that education and like touching on that, but then kind of focusing more on leadership, mindfulness, resilience training, then you're, you know, giving the students and student athletes more applicable skills to cope with their emotions, cope with stressors, cope with failure, which in athletics is never talked about. So with the support financially and emotionally by the athletic department, I implemented a curriculum-guided mentorship program this past fall, and we had nearly 80 of Towson's 500 student athletes participate, and it was just phenomenal. So kind of got a vision for after graduation and how to grow this, but that was tremendous. So, yeah.
That is absolutely incredible and so important, because often student athletes are viewed as operating in this position of privilege. And of course, to an extent, it is a privilege, but that doesn't take away from the amount of pressures and stressors that you have to deal with. And if you don't have support, then you can fall under the cracks. And I think
Absolutely.
It's wonderful that you've implemented such amazing programs and that you've had so many opportunities to share your story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really exciting to see how much it's grown. Going back a little bit, just the idea behind that mentorship, like you said, is that boosting the student athlete support system can really be instrumental. Looking back at my personal experiences, you know, I knew I had my teammates, but it took me so long to call my mom and tell her that I was struggling, just because I'm the oldest of 4 girls. I'm across the country. You know, I had teammates that could go home for a weekend. That wasn't really possible for me. And, you know, knowing you have your teammates, but recognizing that everyone else has got something else going on, I convinced myself that I was a burden to everyone around me. So my whole idea was that maybe if I had a mentor whose job it was just to check in with me like a little bit more often, I wouldn't have isolated myself so much. So, yeah, but the growth of Own Your Roar has been amazing. I constantly am approached by student athletes like all over the country. I helped a gymnast at UCLA start a similar initiative called Brew and Brave.
Yes.
There's an athletics trainer at James Madison University who started an initiative called Duke's Let's Talk. Actually, in the fall during finals, the athletic director for sports medicine and a trainer from Marymount University in Virginia drove down to Towson to meet with me. And they had like reached out to our administrators, like asking, and I was like, oh, they can just call me. Like, I don't want to make them drive down here. Cause I was like, oh no, like I just felt bad. And I'd never had someone do that before. And they were just like, no, we want to, you know, we're so passionate about creating something and increasing our resources for our student athletes. We just want to pick your brain. And I was like, awesome. So that was really cool. I had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk in California about actually just over a month ago, which was just like tremendous. I was like, I didn't even know, it was always like on my bucket list, I guess, but I didn't really know how you go about like getting that opportunity. So I was really surprised when I was invited to contribute to the conference, but was really thrilled to see that value that Own Your Roar has made nationwide. I think that it just kind of showed me that how much that's appreciated at more than just Towson and my immediate community. So that was crazy. There was about, I think like 1,200 attendees, which was like the biggest audience I had ever spoken in front of. And I got there and I had like watched a bunch of TED Talks, but I had seen some that people had like notes, and I got there and they were like, yeah, no, like you can't have notes. And like, there was no teleprompter, and I was like, oh my gosh. But it was awesome. And they had told me, so there was like a rehearsal on the day before, and they were like, oh, by the way, when the lights are all on, like you won't be able to see anybody. Awesome. And then I'd walk out there like during the conference, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people. Like I can totally see everyone. But it was just this like incredible experience. And like, even right after I walked off the stage, like I had a few like social media message requests from people in the audience who had appreciated my message. And so I'm just overall so excited for the platform that Own Your Roar is going to be able to reach once this video is released.
Yeah, that's going to be incredible, and I can't wait to see it. So one of the things that I've noticed about you and your work is that you're also a youth gymnastics coach. Do you talk to your young ladies and your young athletes about mental health as well?
Absolutely. I think with gymnastics specifically, as much as I think it's like mental health is a topic that's indirectly addressed just because fear is one of the leading drivers out of the sport. But I think that, in my experiences growing up and my observations of my teammates, at Taos and everybody coming from all over the place in their own experiences, is it's constantly met with, these phrases of just like, get out of your head and stop thinking so much. So trying to really shift that into a positive light and kind of using your mind as a tool instead of just something that we feel like sets us back, I think can be really beneficial. And then I think just trying to treat it as no big deal. I think that oftentimes people think that there are qualifications. So like for me, my whole thing was, I'm just being dramatic because, unfortunately it did progress to suicidal thoughts for me, but at the time I wasn't having them. And so I was like, well, I can't say I'm depressed because I haven't had suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And so just teaching that, we all live on this mental health continuum and that we have ups and downs in our life just as we live it. Like it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. And if you're feeling anxious before a competition, that's completely normal. But learning how to channel your nerves into something positive instead of just that paralyzing fear. So
that's amazing.
I love it. I think coaches, teachers, anyone in a position, it has such an opportunity to empower our youth, and just getting to be part of that journey, I think is just amazing. I think that kind of like I touched on earlier, I just think education is such a powerful tool to shifting these societal norms that we live in and encouraging, rewarding contributions to our communities.
Definitely. That is fantastic. What do you think it's going to take to because mental health stigma exists in broader society as well as within sports, but what role do you think athletes can play in kind of undermining the stigma of mental health? Do you think there is a role for athletes to play?
Absolutely. I think that while, not all of us are crazy superstar Olympians, I definitely am not close to that. I think that what you learn as an athlete and that discipline is really something beneficial and something that I'll carry with me the rest of my life. And so I think I think that you can just teach, like everyone can, whether or not they competed in athletics. I think a lot of us have just picked up a basketball in our life. So I think that athletics is absolutely relatable in just relating to that competition. And so really whatever you're passionate about, whether music or art or athletics, we all understand that drive. So athletics, I think, presents a really perfect analogy, which is, hey, we have physical injuries all the time. It's the same thing with our mental health. So like I said, when I ruptured my Achilles, I had this like concrete step-by-step recovery plan to guide me back to physical health. And everybody could see, where I was on that path, if I had this cast, if I had surgery, whatever, how far along I was in my rehab. But with my mental health, there wasn't that same transparency and that just general understanding. So I think just kind of promoting that idea can be really instrumental to changing.
That's amazing. And so you're a senior and you have,
yeah.
What does that feel like for you?
Oh my gosh. It's wild. Everyone says it goes by really fast.
Yeah.
But like looking back, I feel like I just moved into the dorms like a week ago. I actually have my senior competition this Sunday, which is going to be wild. Yeah, so my parents are flying out. My sisters are coming. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And especially, getting to share that with the 3 girls that have been in my senior class on the gymnastics team for these past 4 years. We have all, grown through so much together. So it's definitely crazy. Looking towards life after graduation, life without gymnastics is wild, to say the least. It's just that I've been a gymnast my whole life, and so now I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I'm gonna have an extra 6 hours of my day that like I'm not gonna be in the gym. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, I have to figure out how to work out. Gymnastics is not quite the sport where in 10 years I can go flip on a beam by any means. So I'm excited though. It's definitely bittersweet, but I'm excited for the next chapter. So.
That's fantastic. I have to ask, what is your favorite apparatus?
Oh gosh, I love the floor. That's probably my strength, at least now in my career. It's just like so much fun. And college gymnastics, just a little bit about the sport. Like club gymnastics, you go to a competition and it's pretty quiet. It's much more individualized. And when you go to college, you have a team behind you, you have a school behind you, you have a community behind you. And that energy when you're on the floor, dancing, tumbling,
yes,
it's like there is just nothing like it. So yeah, it's very exciting. But I don't know, I really love floor. I love bars. Beam is kind of scary. And I'm just not that good at vault, but the sport is just amazing. So I couldn't be more grateful for my experiences.
That's wonderful. And so hearing you talk and thinking about the next chapter, what would your dream next chapter be? What would that look like?
So I definitely have a few ideas. I feel like throughout my college career, I've probably put on like 17 different hats, which is also a little bit overwhelming. I had last summer, I participated in the governor's summer internship program. So I got to work at the Maryland Higher Education Commission, working on a grant with the Opioid Operational Command Center. So I got to do some really cool hands-on work addressing the opioid crisis statewide through the platform of higher education. So I really, really liked that opportunity. People kind of joke around that I should like go into government, go into politics. So I'm definitely interested in exploring that outlet. I think that law school is definitely in the cards for me. But before I do that, I'm really looking forward to the continuation of Own Your Roar. So I don't have the concrete steps yet, and I kind of plan to explore that after season ends, because a few years ago I looked towards turning Own Your Roar into a more concrete organization, but there's just a lot of NCAA eligibility risks that just decided, like, let's just put that on hold for now. And, being grateful for the resources that Towson was helping me provide at the time anyways, that didn't seem to hinder any progress. But yeah, there's a lot I'm looking at exploring, but the one thing that for sure is clear is the continuation of Own Your Roar, which I plan to include, comprising like a well-rounded panel of current and former student athletes, coaches, trainers, clinical professionals to develop this official curriculum that can accompany a mentorship program. So yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with everything. You're going to be someone to watch. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.